They thought they had found an ordinary man in an ordinary moment. They had no idea they had just encountered the person responsible for uncovering the truth they never expected to face. The evening streets of a quiet neighborhood in Virginia were calm as Marcus Williams drove through the area with a simple mission in mind. To anyone watching from outside, he looked like any other person heading home after a long day. There was nothing about his vehicle, his clothing, or his quiet presence that revealed the responsibility he carried. No one passing by would have guessed that Marcus was a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a man whose work required patience, careful observation, and a commitment to protecting the principles he believed in. Marcus had learned throughout his career that the most important truths were often hidden beneath the surface. A person's appearance rarely told the complete story. A quiet individual could carry years of experience. An ordinary conversation could reveal something much deeper. That understanding shaped the way Marcus lived his life. He did not seek attention. He did not introduce himself by his position. He believed that character mattered more than recognition. For Marcus, the badge he carried was not a symbol of personal importance. It was a reminder of responsibility. Years earlier, Marcus had chosen a career dedicated to investigating difficult situations and searching for facts when others only saw assumptions. His work required him to remain calm, gather information, and understand every side before reaching conclusions. Those lessons became part of who he was. They influenced how he spoke, how he listened, and how he handled moments when people did not immediately understand him. On this particular afternoon, Marcus was focused on his assignment and expected nothing unusual. But sometimes the most unexpected moments happen when people believe they already understand what is happening. Officer Daniel Carter was completing his regular patrol duties when he noticed Marcus nearby. Like many officers with years of experience, Daniel trusted his ability to quickly recognize situations that required tension. He believed experience came from knowing what details mattered and acting when something seemed unusual. From his perspective, this was simply another interaction during a normal shift. He did not know the person in front of him. He did not know the years of service behind Marcus's calm expression. He did not know that the man he was evaluating had spent his career examining situations exactly like this one. Marcus noticed the officer approaching but remained calm. He understood that first impressions could shape conversations before anyone had a chance to learn the full truth. He had seen it many times throughout his life. People often reacted to what they could see, not what they could not. But Marcus also understood something important. Truth did not need to be forced. It only needed the opportunity to appear. As the conversation began, neither man knew that this simple encounter would soon reveal a story far greater than either of them expected. One believed he was meeting an ordinary citizen. The other knew that every moment was an opportunity to discover what was really happening beneath the surface. Long before the quiet neighborhood encounter with Officer Daniel Carter, Marcus Williams had learned one important lesson that guided every part of his life. The truth is often hidden beneath what people see first. His journey to becoming a Federal Bureau of Investigation special agent was not built on recognition or attention. It was built on patience, discipline, and a commitment to understanding situations before making decisions. Marcus grew up believing that service was not about being noticed. It was about being dependable when people needed someone they could trust. Throughout his career, he developed the ability to observe carefully and remain calm even when circumstances became uncertain. Those skills became essential in his work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where details mattered and assumptions could create serious mistakes. Marcus knew that every investigation began with questions, not conclusions. He understood that people were complicated, and a single moment could never reveal an entire life story. That belief shaped the way he interacted with everyone he met. Whether he was speaking with a witness, reviewing information, or handling a difficult conversation, Marcus focused on facts before opinions. His colleagues respected him not because he demanded recognition, but because he consistently showed professionalism and integrity. Outside of his work, Marcus kept his life simple. He did not search for opportunities to tell people about his position. He preferred being known for his character rather than his title. To neighbors and strangers, He was simply Marcus, a thoughtful person who valued privacy and peaceful moments. Few people knew about the responsibilities he carried or the cases he had worked on throughout his career. Marcus believed that a badge was not meant to separate him from others. It was meant to remind him of the responsibility he had accepted. That mindset became especially important during moments when people judged him without knowing his background. He understood that assumptions were a natural part of human behavior, but he also believed people had the ability to look deeper and learn more. This was why Marcus rarely reacted emotionally when others misunderstood him. He had seen enough in his career to know that patience often revealed more than arguments ever could. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Carter had built his own understanding of the world through years of police work. He believed experience helped him recognize situations quickly and make responsible decisions. His intentions came from wanting to do his job correctly, but like anyone else, his perspective was shaped by the information available to him at the moment. When he encountered Marcus, he saw only a small piece of the picture. He did not see the years of preparation, the professional responsibilities, or the hidden purpose behind Marcus's quiet confidence. Marcus noticed the officer's approach and understood immediately that the conversation could go in many directions. But he remained composed because he knew something important. A person's true identity was not determined by the assumptions others made about them. It was revealed through actions, patience, and truth. As the two men continued their conversation, neither realized that this moment would soon become a lesson about perception, responsibility, and the danger of believing that a first impression tells the entire story. The conversation between Marcus Williams and Officer Daniel Carter continued, but the difference between what each man understood was becoming clearer with every passing moment. Daniel believed he was simply handling another situation during his patrol. He relied on his experience, his training, and the information available in front of him. To him, the details seemed straightforward. But Marcus knew something Daniel did not. A person could never be fully understood by a few visible details. Behind every face was a history. Behind every decision was a reason. Behind every quiet moment was a story waiting to be discovered. Marcus remained calm as the interaction continued. He answered questions respectfully and allowed Daniel to follow the process he believed was necessary. Marcus had spent years working in environments where patience was essential. In his role with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he had learned that rushing toward conclusions often created mistakes. The strongest decisions came from gathering information, listening carefully, and understanding the complete situation. That mindset was not just part of his career. It was part of who he was. Daniel observed Marcus closely. Something about the man's attitude was different from what he expected. Marcus was not trying to argue. He was not trying to control the conversation. He simply remained composed. That calmness caught Daniel's attention because many people reacted differently when they felt misunderstood. Marcus did not appear concerned about proving himself. He acted like someone who knew that the truth would eventually become clear. What Daniel did not know was that Marcus had spent years studying situations exactly like this one. He understood how quickly assumptions could form. He understood how a person's appearance, location, or circumstances could influence the way others viewed them. But Marcus also understood that assumptions were not the same as facts. Throughout his career, he had witnessed how important it was to separate what people believed from what could actually be proven. Daniel continued reviewing the situation, believing he was gathering the information needed to make a responsible decision. He did not see himself as acting unfairly. He believed he was doing his job. That was what made the moment more complicated. The issue was not simply about one person being right or wrong. It was about how easily anyone could miss important details when they believed they already understood the situation. Marcus recognized that Daniel was acting based on his current perspective. Instead of reacting with frustration, Marcus chose patience. He knew that real change rarely came from arguments. It came when people had the opportunity to see something they had not noticed before. The afternoon continued quietly around them. People nearby went about their normal routines without realizing that a simple conversation was becoming a meaningful moment. No one knew that the man standing there carried a responsibility far greater than anyone could see. No one knew that the officer asking questions would soon discover that the situation was not what he first believed. For now, Daniel still saw Marcus as just another person in a routine encounter. But Marcus knew that truth had a way of revealing itself when the right moment arrived. And that moment was getting closer. The longer the conversation continued, the more Officer Daniel Carter began to notice that something about Marcus Williams did not fit the simple picture he had created at the beginning. The situation appeared ordinary from the outside, but small details were creating questions in Daniel's mind. Marcus remained calm, respectful, and patient, even as the interaction continued longer than expected. He did not try to force the conversation in any direction. He did not attempt to use information that Daniel did not yet know. He simply allowed the process to move forward. That choice revealed something about Marcus that Daniel could not immediately explain. There was a quiet confidence in the way Marcus carried himself. It was not the confidence of someone trying to appear important. It was the confidence of someone who understood himself completely. Marcus had learned throughout his career that people often revealed more through their actions than through their words. In his work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he had seen situations where the first version of a story was incomplete. Important details were often discovered only after someone took the time to look deeper. That lesson stayed with him during this encounter. Daniel continued reviewing the available information, searching for a clearer understanding of the situation. He believed he was following the correct procedures and doing what his responsibilities required. But as he continued, he started to recognize something important. The person in front of him was not reacting like someone trying to avoid questions. Marcus appeared comfortable because he knew the truth about himself, even if others did not. Daniel looked again at the information he had collected. Certain details created a feeling that there was more to discover. Nothing immediately explained the full picture, but there were signs that Marcus's background might be different from what he originally assumed. The officer paused and considered whether he had seen only one small part of a much larger story. Marcus noticed the change but remained quiet. He understood that moments like this were not solved by demanding that people see the truth immediately. Real understanding required time. Throughout his life, Marcus had learned that patience could reveal what pressure often could not. He knew that if the facts were given the opportunity to appear, they would speak for themselves. Daniel continued with the necessary steps while trying to understand why his initial impression felt incomplete. He thought about how quickly people could create opinions based on limited information. He thought about how easy it was to believe that the first thing someone noticed was the most important thing. But experience had taught him that reality was usually more complicated. Around them, the neighborhood remained peaceful. The sounds of everyday life continued without interruption. People passed by without knowing that a quiet conversation was creating a moment of reflection for both men. To anyone watching, it was simply an officer speaking with a citizen. But beneath the surface, something deeper was happening. Daniel was beginning to understand that every person carried a story beyond what could be seen immediately. Marcus was allowing that realization to happen naturally. Then, as Daniel reviewed one more piece of information, he noticed a detail that changed the direction of his thinking. It was not the answer yet, but it was the first sign that the man standing in front of him was connected to something much larger than he had imagined. The small detail Officer Daniel Carter noticed began to change the way he viewed the entire situation. It was not a dramatic moment. There was no sudden announcement or immediate explanation. Instead, it was a quiet realization that the information in front of him did not match the simple assumption he had created earlier. Daniel looked carefully at the details again, trying to understand what he had missed. Throughout his career, he had learned the importance of paying attention. He believed responsibility came from noticing small things and making careful decisions. But now he was facing a different kind of lesson. Sometimes the most important details were not the ones that appeared first. Sometimes they were the ones people discovered only after taking the time to look deeper. Marcus Williams remained patient as Daniel continued his review. He understood the process and respected the need for accuracy. Marcus had spent years working in situations where information had to be verified before conclusions could be made. In his role with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he had learned that assumptions could create problems when they replaced facts. Every person, every situation, and every decision required a complete understanding. That principle guided him now. Daniel began checking additional information connected to Marcus. The details suggested that there was a professional background that had not been visible during the initial conversation. Something about the information indicated that Marcus was connected to a level of service far beyond what Daniel had expected. The officer paused as he considered the possibility that his first impression had been incomplete. He thought about the way Marcus had handled every question. He thought about how calm the man remained despite being placed in a situation where many people might have reacted differently. Marcus never attempted to control the interaction. He never demanded special attention. He simply allowed the facts to become clear at their own pace. That approach stayed in Daniel's mind. Many people, when misunderstood, immediately tried to explain why they deserved different treatment. Marcus did the opposite. He showed through his actions that respect should not depend on discovering someone's title or position. Respect should exist before any achievement becomes known. As Daniel continued the verification process, he realized that he was learning something important about perception. A person could look ordinary while carrying extraordinary responsibilities. A quiet conversation could reveal a much larger story. A moment that seemed insignificant could become a powerful reminder about how people see each other. Marcus watched silently as Daniel reviewed the information. He knew this moment was not about proving that he was important. His identity was not valuable because of the position he held. His identity was valuable because of the choices he had made throughout his life. The badge connected to his work represented responsibility, not superiority. The afternoon continued around them. The neighborhood remained peaceful, and the world continued without knowing that a significant discovery was unfolding. Daniel prepared to make the next verification step, aware that the information he was about to confirm could completely change his understanding of the encounter. He reached for his phone and prepared to contact the appropriate channel. Marcus remained calm, knowing that the truth did not need to be forced. It only needed the right moment to appear. And that moment was now approaching. The phone call connected, and Officer Daniel Carter waited for the information that would finally explain the mystery surrounding Marcus Williams. The quiet neighborhood remained unchanged around them, but for Daniel, the entire situation had shifted. What began as a routine interaction had become a moment of realization. He listened carefully as the official verification process began, expecting a simple answer, but preparing himself for whatever the information revealed. Marcus stood calmly nearby, watching without concern. He had experienced moments like this before, moments when people discovered that the person in front of them carried a story they never expected. But Marcus did not view these situations as opportunities to prove his importance. He viewed them as reminders that every person deserved to be understood before being judged. As the confirmation continued, Daniel received the information that changed everything he thought he knew about the encounter. The details verified that Marcus Williams was not simply an ordinary citizen passing through the neighborhood. He was a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, carrying years of professional responsibility and a record of service that extended far beyond what anyone could see. For a moment, Daniel remained quiet. He thought back to the beginning of the conversation. He remembered how quickly he had formed an impression based only on the information available at the time. He remembered assuming he understood the situation before knowing the complete story. Now, he realized how incomplete that understanding had been. The most surprising part was not only Marcus's position. It was the way Marcus had handled every moment before the truth was revealed. He had not used his authority to change the conversation. He had not attempted to make himself appear more important. He had simply allowed the process to continue. That decision revealed more about Marcus's character than any badge could. Daniel began to understand that real authority was not about demanding recognition. It was about having the confidence to remain respectful even when others did not yet know the full truth. Marcus's badge represented his professional responsibility, but his actions represented his personal values. The discovery created a moment of reflection for Daniel. He realized that people could never be fully understood by one interaction. A person's appearance, circumstances, or first impression could never reveal the complete picture. Behind every individual was a history filled with experiences, challenges, and decisions that shaped who they became. Marcus finally acknowledged the confirmation with the same calm attitude he had shown from the beginning. He did not celebrate the moment. He did not criticize Daniel. Instead, he focused on the larger lesson. Situations like this were opportunities to remember the importance of fairness and understanding. Daniel looked at Marcus differently now, not because a title had changed the man's value, but because he finally recognized the person who had been standing there all along. The afternoon continued quietly around them. Nothing dramatic happened. No crowd gathered. No attention was drawn to the moment. Yet something important had changed. One man discovered that the truth was much larger than his first assumption. The other showed that dignity did not require recognition. And in that quiet exchange, both learned that the strongest message was often delivered not through power, but through patience and character. The confirmation had revealed the truth about Marcus Williams, but the most important part of the moment was not the badge he carried. It was the lesson hidden behind the discovery. Officer Daniel Carter stood quietly, thinking about how differently the entire interaction looked now compared to when it first began. The same person was standing in front of him. The same conversation had taken place. The only thing that changed was his understanding. Marcus had not become more valuable because Daniel learned his identity. His value had always been there. The information simply allowed Daniel to see what had existed all along. Marcus understood that moments like this happened because people often made decisions with limited information. He did not believe that every misunderstanding came from bad intentions. Sometimes people simply saw one small piece of a much larger story. The important question was whether they were willing to recognize what they had missed. Throughout his career with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Marcus had learned that accountability was not about creating conflict. It was about discovering facts and allowing those facts to guide better decisions. He believed that real improvement happened when people had the courage to examine their own actions. That belief shaped the way he handled the situation with Daniel. He did not focus on embarrassment or blame. He focused on understanding. Daniel listened as Marcus explained the importance of seeing people as complete individuals rather than judging them based on a single moment. His words were calm and thoughtful. They were not a lecture. They were the perspective of someone who had spent years observing how assumptions could influence decisions. Marcus explained that everyone carried experiences that others could not immediately see. A person's background, responsibilities, and personal journey were often hidden from view. That was why patience and respect mattered in every interaction. Daniel reflected on those words. He realized that the greatest lesson from the encounter was not that Marcus had an important position. The lesson was that Marcus deserved the same respect before his position was known. The badge explained his professional role, but it did not create his dignity. His dignity existed because of who he was and how he chose to treat others. The conversation became a reminder that authority should never be measured only by rank or title. True leadership appeared in moments when a person had the ability to use influence but chose understanding instead. Marcus could have changed the entire situation immediately by revealing his identity, but he allowed the process to continue because he believed fairness mattered. Daniel began thinking differently about future encounters. He understood that every person he met might carry a story he could not see. A quiet individual could have extraordinary experiences. A simple conversation could contain a deeper lesson. A first impression could be completely incomplete. The neighborhood remained peaceful as the afternoon continued. There were no dramatic scenes, only two people standing in a quiet moment of reflection. Yet the impact of that conversation would remain with both of them. Marcus continued carrying the same values that had guided him throughout his life. Daniel carried a new understanding of what it meant to truly see another person. Because sometimes the most powerful discoveries are not about finding out who someone is. They are about realizing that every person was already worthy of respect before the truth was revealed. The encounter between Marcus Williams and Officer Daniel Carter ended quietly, but the impact of that moment continued long after they went their separate ways. For Daniel, the experience became a reminder that every interaction carried more meaning than what appeared on the surface. He returned to his daily responsibilities with a different perspective, understanding that experience was valuable, but humility was equally important. He realized that knowing how to recognize situations was only part of being responsible. The other part was knowing when to slow down, listen, and consider what might be missing. Marcus had shown him that lesson without demanding attention or recognition. Marcus continued his work with the same dedication that had guided him throughout his career. The discovery of his identity had not changed who he was. He was still the same person who believed in fairness, patience, and careful understanding. The Federal Bureau of Investigation badge he carried represented his professional duty, but the values behind that badge came from years of personal choices. Marcus understood that authority was not about being above others. It was about accepting responsibility and using knowledge wisely. In the days following the encounter, Daniel thought about how easily people could be defined by a single moment. A person could be viewed through a narrow perspective without anyone realizing how incomplete that perspective was. He thought about Marcus standing calmly during the conversation, never trying to control the outcome by revealing information that could immediately change everything. That decision stayed with him. It showed Daniel that confidence did not require constant explanation. People who truly understood their own values did not always need to prove themselves. Their actions often spoke more clearly than words. The lesson also reminded Daniel that systems were built by individuals, and every individual decision mattered. Procedures were important, but so was the way people applied them. Respect, fairness, and awareness were not separate from responsibility. They were part of it. Marcus believed that meaningful change rarely came from one dramatic moment. It came from many small choices made by people who were willing to learn. He had spent years investigating complex situations and discovering that truth often required patience. The same principle applied to everyday interactions. Before judging someone, people had to be willing to understand them. Before creating conclusions, they had to be willing to ask questions. The story of Marcus and Daniel was not simply about discovering a hidden identity. It was about discovering a better way to see others. The most important revelation was not that Marcus was a Federal Bureau of Investigation agent. The most important revelation was that respect should exist before anyone knows another person's achievements. As time passed, the quiet neighborhood where the encounter happened returned to normal. There was no public announcement, no celebration, and no attention from the outside world. But two people carried forward a valuable lesson. Marcus continued serving with the same quiet commitment that defined him. Daniel continued his work with a deeper awareness of the responsibility that came with his role. The moment reminded them both that truth was not always hidden because someone wanted to deceive others. Sometimes truth was hidden simply because people had not taken the time to look closer. And sometimes the greatest change begins when someone finally chooses to see beyond the surface. Months after the quiet encounter between Marcus Williams and Officer Daniel Carter, the memory of that afternoon remained a powerful reminder of how easily people could misunderstand one another. Neither man expected a simple conversation to create such a meaningful reflection, but sometimes the smallest moments reveal the greatest lessons. Marcus continued his work with the same dedication and professionalism that had guided him throughout his career. The Federal Bureau of Investigation badge he carried remained a symbol of responsibility, not importance. To Marcus, the badge was never about being recognized. It was about serving with integrity and protecting the principles he believed in. He knew that true leadership was not measured by how many people knew your title. It was measured by how you treated people when no one knew your title at all. Daniel also carried the lesson forward. His experience with Marcus changed the way he approached future interactions. He became more aware of how quickly assumptions could form and how important it was to search for the complete story before reaching conclusions. He understood that professional responsibility required more than following procedures. It required awareness, patience, and respect for the people behind every situation. The encounter reminded him that every person he met had a history that could not be seen immediately. Some carried years of service. Some carried personal challenges. Some carried responsibilities that remained invisible to the outside world. Marcus and Daniel came from different backgrounds and held different roles, but the lesson they shared was universal. People should not be measured only by what others notice first. A person's appearance, location, or circumstances could never reveal the full truth of who they were. The most important discoveries often came when people chose curiosity over assumption and understanding over judgment. Marcus often reflected on how the moment unfolded. He knew that revealing his identity immediately would have changed the direction of the conversation, but he also knew that meaningful lessons were not created by simply showing authority. They were created through patience and example. By allowing the process to continue naturally, he gave Daniel the opportunity to discover something deeper. Respect should not come only after someone proves their value. Respect should be the starting point. The story between the black FBI agent and the white police officer was not about one person defeating another. It was not about embarrassment or winning an argument. It was about awareness. It was about recognizing that every person deserves to be seen as a complete human being before any achievement or position is revealed. The world often moves quickly. People make decisions in seconds. They form opinions based on limited information and sometimes forget that every individual carries a story beyond what is visible. But moments like this serve as reminders that slowing down can change everything. The greatest lesson Marcus left behind was simple. A badge can reveal a person's authority, but character reveals a person's true strength. And the greatest form of justice is not found in proving someone wrong. It is found in creating a world where people take the time to understand one another before making a judgment.